Well, welcome everybody. I am Matt El Muccio. I am the CO of Deveron Base in New Jersey, and I have the pleasure of being able to interview Cole Horton. He is an author and historian. You may not necessarily know him by name, but if you're watching this, you probably own one of his books because he's written everything from, and I'm looking over just the ones that I own. Absolutely everything you need to know, Star Wars, Lego Star Wars Chronicles of the Force, Star Wars Maker Lab, Star Wars Book of Lists, the Star Wars book, and the Traveler's Guide to Batuu. And that's certainly there's more that I don't own, but I was just amazed to know that I own these books. They're family favorites. My daughter and I read them all the time. We literally spend days we're just going through these books. It's a great family books, and so I'm so excited to talk to you about these books and dive into it. But the first question you always have to ask is, how did you become a Star Wars fan?
Yeah, for me, it was by accident. I think it was Christmas of 1995. We took our annual excursion across town to Toys R Us, and with the goal of spending all of our newly earned Christmas money. And I turned the corner down one of the aisles, and there was a Galoob Stormtrooper playset. I still have it on the shelf here, and they're on an end cap. And I don't know what it was about that thing, but it spoke to me. And I picked it up that day, and I had never seen Star Wars. I didn't really know what it was, and took it home. And then that just started everything. And it was the one thing as a kid I didn't grow out of. Now, that was an interesting time to find Star Wars because the toys were coming back, but there weren't new stories, right? We were still a few years off from the special editions coming out in theaters. So that was the first time I actually saw Star Wars in theaters. My first experience watching at home was on VHS, and I watched the films out of order. I just chose based on the covers that looked the coolest.
What'd you start with?
But yeah,
What'd you start with?
I started with A New Hope, but then I went to Return of the Jedi, and eventually caught up and figured it all out. But yeah, I was the one kid in elementary school who was so excited about this Star Wars thing, right? And everyone's parents knew it, but the other kids hadn't caught up yet. But that wouldn't take long, of course, with the special editions and then the prequel trilogy coming a little bit later. And it just stuck with me forever. In high school, I founded my local fan force chapter and realized that this fandom is better with people. And I was also lucky growing up in Indiana that Star Wars Celebration 2 happened just up the road in Indianapolis. And
Okay.
I was 16 at the time and went there and ran into my first costuming clubs, and that changed me. I remember standing at the Hyatt, and those are the early days of the Legions, of course. And one of the stormtroopers there tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Son, be a friend of the Empire," and handed me his helmet while he was finishing putting his armor on. And there was no going back from that. Once I held my first bucket. The moment I turned 18, I joined the 501st, and later went on to be part of the R2 Builders, and just went from there.
Wow, yeah. So you're not only a writer, but you're one of us, and so it's cool to know that these books have the same love that all of us have put into them. It's obvious when you read them, but that's fantastic. So then you got into writing Star Wars books. How did that happen?
Yeah, I'd been going to conventions, so I went to every celebration stateside I could get to from there, and I was actually volunteering for the Troop-athlon event, and that got me into sort of the mix of the fan clubs and leadership things there, and I met some people along the way. And it was really through those conventions that I kind of made the right connections. And at one point I pitched a blog series to StarWars.com called From World War to Star Wars. And I ran that for a number of years every month. And that was right before the Disney acquisition of Lucasfilm. And, there was a bit of a quiet period there, but then all of a sudden in 2015, all this exciting new material was going to, be unleashed on all of us fans. And they were looking for new authors. And I had been writing for StarWars.com and was kind of in the right place at the right time. And that's where where the first one came up.
Nice, nice. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, but the first one, is it the absolute everything you need to know?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah, which is a big task to start, but it was also part of Journey to Star Wars: The Force Awakens. So, what was it like to be part of sort of Disney's launch of Star Wars?
It was exciting. I didn't do it by myself. I was just one of
Yep.
4 authors on that book, but it was an interesting time, right? We were all curious about what would be coming, and so any little tidbit was exciting. That one was daunting, in part because it's called Star Wars: Absolutely Everything You Need to Know. And how do you choose? It was also daunting. It was my first book. I had never submitted a manuscript before. I don't have an agent. Like, I didn't have any of that stuff that I guess you're supposed to have when you write books. And the editorial team at DK were great. They understood that, and I did a tryout. I don't know if I've ever talked about this, but I wrote a tryout page so they could make sure I could do it, and I guess it worked, because they asked me to work on the book, and that one just it was a fun book, so it was a good one to get started with.
Yeah, and so you were collaborating on that one. How did, I guess, I don't know if you worked as a team or how that worked out, but how'd you guys go about deciding everything you need to know?
In that case, in a lot of cases, the outlines are already done. They already have a general idea of sort of the topics or the spreads, right, that we're going to cover throughout the course of the book. But then it's about whittling it down and finding the right balance between useful information, because you do want to pay off the title of the book, but also keep it interesting and make sure you keep the audience in mind. That's sort of written with that younger audience in mind. You want it to be fun for the whole family, but you want it to be approachable for that younger crowd. And so there you got to make sure you've got a good mix of, I called it the ooey gooey stuff. There's just, you're going to talk about Gungan snot in a book like that. So it's not all serious all the time. And yeah, you just want to have a little fun mix like that.
Yeah, I mean, that book helped get my daughter into Star Wars. She was a little iffy for a while, until she started seeing more of what it was about. But there's a lot of, it's a very family friendly book, because I loved reading it with her. She's still, to this day, she's only 10, so I say to this day, but I always find her just upstairs, just thumbing through, and Dad, did you know this? Dad, did you know that? So
Yeah, well, that's who it's for. I mean, that is honestly who it's for kids, their parents, to be able to sit down and just enjoy it.
Another cool book that you wrote, and you wrote with Liz Lee Henke, who has a master's degree in bacteriology. You wrote Star Wars Maker Lab, which my daughter and I just saw and thought it would be cool to do these projects. It's a book full of projects, and there are 20 craft and science projects in there. So you guys were working on this, and I'm sure you were the Star Wars end, I'm guessing.
That's right. You don't want me to do the science. No, Liz really did the hard work on that one. It was a collaborative process between, you got the editors at DK Books, you've got Liz, who has already written a number of science books herself. So she was a pro at that. And honestly, she was no scrub when it came to Star Wars either. So, I got to come in and kind of help out, and we just kind of looked at all the different experiments maybe that Liz had done before, some other things we had seen that might be fun, try to find that Star Wars theme that worked with them. And then once we found the theme, I got to just go kind of plug in holes and bring it back to that sort of in-universe.
Yeah, because we look at that book, and every time we're just like, oh, we should build this one, we should do that one. But it's again, because Star Wars is, even though it's for us adults as well, it always comes back to the kids, and that was another one. Again, it was one of those books that I had, didn't realize that you had a part of, and it's a special family book. Again, it's another thing that brought me and my daughter together with Star Wars. And then a number of your books do that, and I'll touch on a few more of them. One that I just got that I found interesting, and my daughter and I have not been to Galaxy's Edge yet, or my wife too, but we have not been to Galaxy's Edge, even though it was our goal pre-COVID. That was one of our trips that didn't happen. You wrote this traveler's guide to Batuu, which I kind of describe as like a lonely planet for Batuu, right? Is that a description of it, I guess? And so you're writing, but you're writing in world, like it's, you're in the Star Wars universe kind of writing this stuff. So talk about, a number of your books kind of take place in world. What's it like to do that?
Yeah, it's different because you're still trying to convey information. And you're right, that book was written to be like an in-universe travel guide. I modeled it after Rick Steves, the public radio travel personality, because I thought I could at least infuse information and some personality. Right? You just don't want to give sort of dry information. You can find information on the website. So you want to be able to infuse personality. And for that one, I realized I had to invent a in-universe character who could be there on the ground, because if not, how would you know some of that on the ground information, the local chatter, the rumors, that sort of thing. And it was also helpful because that person could know things when that was the right thing to do, but that person could also not know things in instances where we wanted to maintain some surprises. Because if you have this sort of all-knowing narrator, why they could spoil everything, right? And we didn't want to do that. We didn't want to especially spoil the attractions, right? When you board the Millennium Falcon, that story you're going to go on, that needs to be yours. And when you wander into, Rise of the Resistance and do that attraction, we need to save some of that surprise back. And so, yeah, by being in universe, by inventing this character who I named Elok Thrano, which is just my name, all,
right?
all
It took me
jumbled
a
around.
second on it. I was looking at it, and I was like, I swore he wrote this book, and then oh wait, no, I got it.
Yeah, and Elok could then infuse some of that personality, that Rick Steves kind of approach. This is the information you need, but this is my sort of helpful tips. These are some things I've heard along my travels, and put it all in there. But I, like you, I had never been to Galaxy's Edge when I wrote that. We wrote that pre-park opening, and I think I did 99% of it before I'd ever stepped foot. The two lands hadn't been completed yet, so on either coast. So I had to do all of that with all the documentation provided by the Imagineering team, and lots of photography and a lot of great tools. But yeah, it's an exercise in invention and imagination, because you have to put yourself on a planet and that's a representative, in a theme park that I've never been to. So.
Right, and I guess so. Like I said, obviously, I was always going to be going to see Galaxy's Edge, but you're written from, it's like that book that kind of makes you want to go to visit that place. And so as you're reading it, you're like, oh, that's cool, and this is interesting. And I as my daughter and I, again, were looking through it, we were kind of like, all right, we're going to bring this book, and we're going to look for those extra little things, not just the main things that you get from the book. So it's good from that perspective as well. It's certainly a fun book.
That's certainly the intent. And actually, the last time I was there, I ran into somebody who had the book and had put some marks in all of her pages, and she was using it for that purpose. And that was awesome to see. Somebody actually using a travel guide as a travel guide, but for a planet far, far away.
Now, most of your books that I have here are very visual, right? It's not like you're reading, a novel or something like that. And so I guess you kind of mentioned that a lot of that goes to editorial staff and all that. What kind of input do you have on the visuals of the book?
Yeah, every book's a little bit different. Some books, we get the layouts of the page or the spread, and they're already done. And so there's all the lorem ipsum text just kind of filling in. You're trying to write to, that space that you have, right? And it's about how much information can you cram in and still make it fit with what's there. And in other cases, you are writing on a blank page, right? Open up a document and just start typing. And in that case, you usually are providing some guidance or direction. If you have a specific image in mind, you can say, this is the sort of thing I'm looking for. Sometimes I just give a range. Sometimes I just give like a feeling that I want to evoke. And then writing a book is a lot like a relay race. There's all of these handoffs, and I'm not the first. There's multiple handoffs even before it gets to me, and then I hand it off. And then, in a lot of cases, it's sort of a surprise. Many months down the line, it comes back to me. And I get to kind of see like how did it turn out? What's it looking like?
Yeah, that's got to be fun for you. It's kind of like somebody who worked on the movie and but has only seen their section, or privy to all of the twists that are coming. So yeah, that's kind of cool. So the book that we've been stuck on reading a lot, which is sort of that book that sort of makes sense to every Star Wars fan because it's all the discussions that you have, which is your Star Wars book of lists, right?
Yeah.
It's all of the discussions that you've had as a Star Wars fan. You know, I'm blanking on an exact one, but any discussion you've had or argument about what was the best this or what was the best that,
Yeah.
these are in there. So you know what went into picking what lists you wanted to use, you know, and how you picked, you know, how do you, and as fans, you know, you go online, fans can't, you know, agree on anything. So how did you decide on those things?
Yeah. That one started almost from scratch. So I was working with the editorial staff at Becker and Mayer on that one. And that one was like, all right, what do you got? And yeah, we just kind of went through and like, well, what's interesting? What lends itself to a list? So that one, we actually provided a couple of examples early on when the book was sort of being pitched. And so, you know, you do some more obvious ones like, you know, the meanest bad guys. But then you maybe do some less obvious ones, but you realize they're super important to Star Wars, like lost limbs, right? Somebody's always losing an arm or something. And that's a hallmark, right, of almost every Star Wars story. And so to write something like that, and then on that one too, you want to balance, right? Like what's the sort of need to know information? What's the stuff people are going to expect? But what are some of the things that they aren't going to expect? And try to get that balance of info and whimsy along the way. And yeah, for me, you know, I like the you know, less obvious stuff. I think still one of my favorite spreads was the all the characters played by Warwick Davis, whose names began with W. Now that's some very niche information, right? But for a Star Wars fan, if you've made it to page 150 in my book, hopefully, you know, that's the kind of reader who's going to really enjoy something like that.
Yeah, there are lots of those. I mean, you said it's from the obvious to stuff like characters played by Warwick Davis, starting with a W. But what's been fun for my daughter and I, she'll just randomly pick a page and she'll tell me the topic and she'll ask me, all right, tell me what's on the page. You know, it's a fun little book that way where
Yeah.
you have to guess and she'll start to give me hints or something just to try to say, like, try to push me. Because every
Yeah.
once in a while, you're right, there's something in there where you know, you probably, you know, if you're a big enough Star Wars fan, you probably know it, but it's not always the first and foremost one that's on your mind all the time.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of things where I'm like, I probably would have put that in there, and you know, those type of things, which is exactly what Star Wars fans need. You know, you don't need necessarily to have the same opinions as everybody else,
Yeah.
but you're always having those ideas and thinking those things through.
For sure. The debates have more than half the fun. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I really, you know, that's what that's kind of when I was looking through sort of your catalog that I have. There are all sorts of different books. You know, it's not like I'm getting a different version of the same encyclopedia or something like that. I'm getting, you know, a bunch of different titles with a bunch of different ideas, and they're all different. So, which is why we own them all. So one that's a little bit different is the Lego Star Wars Chronicles of the Force. So now you're writing for Lego Star Wars, which is a little sillier,
Yeah.
and you have probably a little bit more freedom. I don't know. Maybe you tell
For
me
sure.
that, but you know, it's certainly different. So what was it like writing something that's not quite as, I mean, I guess not canon, you know, so there's not as
Yeah.
much, you know, not as much influence there.
There really aren't the constraints, right? If it's been made into a Lego set, it was fair game in that book. And in fact, you're kind of encouraged to, you know, be a little wacky and something like that. But it is totally different, right? You go from something in universe to that, and you really have to put yourself in a totally different mind space. You know, I would go back and look at the Lego Star Wars video games or the Lego Star Wars, you know, shorts that are out there. And you do have to kind of like get in that mode, because it's Lego Star Wars is a distinct view on that galaxy. And but it's really freeing, right? Because almost anything is acceptable. And there were a couple cases where I like try to push the boundaries a little bit or do something like, oh, they're never going to approve that, right? And they did. They did. It was great.
Yeah. I mean, it's, you know, one of the cool things about Lego Star Wars is it pokes fun at Star Wars a little bit, but in sort of a loving way.
Yeah.
And you see that in the same thing in the book. It's, you know, it's making fun of something that all we kind of accept as Star Wars fans as being kind of a little goofy, but still, still good. So so
Sure.
that one's good. Now, did you get to pick the figure that went with it, or Lego
No,
did that?
no, I think that had been decided when Adam and I came on the book.
Okay.
That was already done. Yeah, and in that case, I'm trying to think. I think that one was one we wrote kind of from scratch.
Okay.
There wasn't as much information there to work off of, so blank slate, and you had a lot more freedom, which is always fun. And some of those, I think there's even like decision trees, right? Like, what would you do? Sort of things that determine what are you? Are you going to be a Jedi? Are you going to be a Sith? And I think what's the first question? Like, are you looking for adventure? And if you say no, you just become a moisture farmer. Like, great, we can do that. It's a Star Wars book, but it's Lego, so you can have that fun with it.
Yeah. No, that's definitely a fun one, and we're big Lego Star Wars fans, so all that getting tied together all goes well.
Yeah.
Now, one of the newer books is the Star Wars book, and again, another one that's slightly different from the others. And the way that I kind of, as I was reading through it, the way that it had a feel to it was like a Star Wars textbook, as if you could teach a class out of this book.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more detailed than some of the others. It has a feel of a textbook, and as a teacher, I kind of like that. Well, here's the weird thing. I say it's not kid friendly, but my daughter loves it. She just wants to read it and soak it up, and because she's read all the other stuff, so this one has more information for her.
Yeah.
And so that's really cool. But if you were going to be teaching a course on Star Wars, kind of what would you kind of think the main themes that need to be hit?
There's a lot of them. And that was kind of the fun of that book, was realizing that these themes sort of cut across. I was lucky I got to write the intro of that book, because I wrote that with Dan Zaire, Pablo Hidalgo. But I got to write the intro, and it really was an exploration of like, what are those themes? And you get, good and evil and things like that. But even if you look behind the scenes, you realize like Star Wars is about pushing the boundaries of technology. And all of that matters, right? And being able to look at Star Wars in totality. The fact that that book came out just at the end of the Skywalker saga was like this sort of special time in Star Wars history, and it was like the perfect moment to get to just like sit back and say, like, what is Star Wars? And so I very lucky to be part of that one, because I don't think there's going to be anything like it, right, for a long time. I mean, when else are we going to have this moment where we're going to say, like, what was Star Wars about? And most of it being in universe, but even stepping outside the universe and telling sort of the history of the franchise, you realize it's big, and it goes on and on. I guess that's why we like it, right? It's sort of never ending, and just replaying those same themes over and over.
Now, did you write it before or after the Rise of Skywalker?
I'm trying to think. Before.
Okay.
I think. I don't know. We write these books, and a book can take a year, sometimes more, sometimes less. Maybe it was after. No, I think it was after. And no, it was after, because we had a pretty good sense of things. I think. No, maybe it was before. Might have been before, because
I'm leading you somewhere.
Yeah.
To the next question, which is sort of some of your stuff, at least the Journey of the Force Awakens. Do you get privy to any of the stuff coming out beforehand at all that you can't really talk about?
So occasionally, yes, there are some things. I do remember, maybe it was Book of Lists I'm thinking of.
Okay.
There was a spread in there about different groups, and I would like write in the outline, like maybe something from The Rise of Skywalker would go here. At that time, we just,
right.
Maybe something from Ep9 would go here.
Right.
And I'd get a note back from somebody at Lucasfilm or Story Group, and they go, yes. Right. I go, okay, I gotta leave some space for that. We'll come back and handle that a little bit closer till the time. So it's fun as a fan, right? Because I'm kind of feeling it out and seeing where we're going. And sometimes things are provided in advance, and you got to take all the secrecy very seriously.
Right.
But other times, things are still kind of coming together, and you got to be flexible throughout that process and know that like things change. Sometimes we don't have the answers, or sometimes we just have to wait, and the timeline stretch out, or sometimes you come back and revisit a book after you've been kind of away from it for a little while. But that's just part of the process, and that's just I guess the fun and the danger of working in a ginormous shared universe, right? It's not yours, and there are all these other people moving, and you're all moving in parallel, and you're just there to do your role.
Right. And so you do get to work with the story group a little bit. What's that like?
Great. So they like never told me no. They're always super collaborative. Like it's awesome. Yeah. Again, like as a fan, to feel like you're part of something like that, it's really fun. To get that little insider information, that sort of thing. I did though reach a point where I realized like, if I can save some of the surprises, that's a good thing. And so on some stories, I have more surprises remaining, and others I have a few less. And after you do it a few times, you do realize like, you don't want to be spoiled. You do want to go in and kind of see it as intended. And so if I can kind of minimize those, but still write the best, book that's going to last the longest and live past that release, that's kind of the sweet spot.
Yeah. Well, when The Force Awakens came out, I didn't get to see it opening night because I had to coach. I'm a teacher and coach, and so the next day in school I wasn't going until after, and somebody was running down the hall shouting the spoilers and I didn't hear it. Kids just told me that somebody was shouting it, and I closed the door and I basically said, you don't want to spoil this for me. It won't be good for you.
I agree. No, I like these surprises are so carefully curated, right? Like don't ruin them. That little bit of fun only lasts a minute, but that emotion feeling of seeing it, unspoiled, I dig that.
Yeah. Even though you have an idea of where it's going, it's sometimes the little surprises, even when you're not surprised and you're like, I knew it.
Yeah.
Still, that's the satisfaction of a part of doing it. So you also currently have another book that is potentially coming out. I saw it on Amazon, so it's not completely a secret. So I'm going to ask you about it. Hopefully that's okay.
Yeah.
Called Star Wars Battles That Change the Galaxy. Now, you have a degree in history, correct?
Yep, I do.
Yeah, and so I'm assuming that that's a big, at least part of why you're working on this book. So how did that help with this book? I mean, without don't spoil us.
Yeah.
But talk about, history, and you can even talk about writing the other books and how being a historian helps you out with that.
Yeah, it helped a lot. I mean, for me, this book that may or may not exist has been a bit of a homecoming. I mentioned before, I started writing on StarWars.com on the official blog, from World War to Star Wars, this series that was all about connections between World War II and Star Wars. And so to be writing, about military history as if a historian had done it, it's just me channeling all the stuff that, I devoured growing up and everything that I studied in my time. So it's been cool. It's been really cool. And to kind of come full circle on something like that, however many years later, it's a special one.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing that's special about Star Wars is it can connect you to so many different facets of your life. And because there's so many universal themes in it, I can see how as a historian, you got to get in that mindset sometimes when you're talking about it too, because now we've got so much of the content that you can kind of it can have a historical feel to it.
Yeah, it is interesting how, you take a slightly different look at a subject and you kind of see it in a whole new way. And I've written all these books, none of them are the same. I'm 12 or 13 books in now. And, this one feels completely different because, it's so rare that you get to spend time to look at something from such a specific perspective. That's the fun of Star Wars, right? You can do a whole book about one planet in a galaxy far, far away, right? And really it's one planet, but it's like one city on one planet in a galaxy far, far away. And that can be a whole book, all the way to something like the Star Wars book, where you have to, like create the textbook that is all of Star Wars, and to make those work, that's part of the puzzle. And the editors especially are good at keeping that puzzle straight and keeping us focused. And I'm just lucky that occasionally they ask me to show up and help figure out the puzzle with them.
Yeah, that's got to be a thrill, to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, especially like I'm just a fan. I went to celebrations, and I hung out at the Legion booths, and I built robots, and just a fan. And somewhere along the way, I learned to write about it, and now here I am. So.
Yeah. I mean, it's a part of why we do the Legion, and because you feel connected to the universe, but you do something else with it. All the charity work and all that stuff that we do connects us to this world, and makes it even more special for us.
For sure.
For sure. So StarWars.com says your day job is working on Star Wars EA games.
Yes.
So what can you tell us about that? I mean, this is mostly going to be about books, but I figured that's too cool a nugget to skip over.
Yeah, I worked on Star Wars at EA for 5 years total. Still there, working on something a little different right now, but it was it's great. I still get to touch Star Wars occasionally, and still field questions. I worked more on the marketing side of things, so give me no credit. I don't make any of the amazing games you play. I can't do any of that, but just helping with understanding fans, and the research was a big part of what I did, and understanding the franchise, and trying to help out as much as I can to all the people who actually had skills, who are making all that stuff. So that's been a lot of fun, because if I wasn't working on the games, I'd be playing them. And so now I get to do both. And it's interesting that my day job that had been in marketing and consumer research for many years turned into Star Wars eventually. And, I got to work on Star Wars 16 hours a day sometimes. And, I would have thought maybe I get tired of it after, all those hours and for that amount of time, and never did. So I think that's a testament. Like,
because a lot of us would say that, there's 40 something years going on here where I'm still waiting to get tired of it.
Yeah, that's right. And never really, got burned out on it. And there's always something cool to do or discover. There's always new Star Wars coming. There's always some facet of the community that's really interesting and cool. And it keeps evolving. I've been part of it long enough to see things change a lot. And that's been cool too.
Awesome. Well, I'm so appreciative of your time that you spent chatting with me. Obviously I'm a big fan of your books, and now I'm really excited for whatever other projects you're working on, because like I said, these are just books that, if you're a Star Wars fan, you'd love to have in your collection, because they're conversation starters, they're filling the gaps, they're whatever you need. And so thank you for your contributions to those, and thank you for chatting with me today.
Yeah, no, thank you. Pleasure's all mine. Anytime.
All right, thanks. All right, let me see if I end this here. So just hit end, right?
I think so. And that should
it theoretically do all this stuff.
Close us right out.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. That was fun.
Yeah, thank you.
I didn't realize that you were a Legion member as well. So that was cool to hear, because it's been a big part of my life the past almost 5 years.
Yeah.
And so, it's cool to hear that those are the type of people working on these books.
That's right. Yeah. No, there's fans everywhere. You never know where somebody's going to end up. So,
yeah.
Cool, man. Well, thanks for reading, and thank the whole family for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I said, well, I was surprised, and I was like, I just said I'd do an interview, and they said, can you do this one?
Yeah.
I was like, well, let me see who it is. And I'm like, yes, absolutely.
Well, happy to do it. I'm glad you guys put this on. It's an amazing event. I watched last year. So.
Oh, cool. Yeah. It was, I guess we're still in COVID, but last year was at the beginning where people were still not too zoomed out.
That's right. Yeah.
We'll be interested to see what it looks like this year, but.
For sure.
All right. Thanks, man.
Take it easy.
All right. Be good.